Good morning, students. Before we start our lesson, can you please take out your Aristo Paper 1 Skills Book Unit 4 and also your Reading Passages booklet. If you left them at school, you can just download them from your Google Classroom. Here is our plan today. First, we will introduce some new rhetorical devices to you. And then, in the second half of the lesson, we will focus on an advanced reading strategy, which is making inferences. Let's start with rhetorical devices. In Unit 2, we have already learned simile, metaphor, personification, and irony, and I hope you still remember what they mean. And now we're going to learn 5 more rhetorical devices. The first rhetorical device is euphemism, which means replacing an expression that may sound rude, unpleasant, or negative with a better one. Let's take a look at the example here. Instead of saying the dead bodies of the animals, the writer uses the term the remains. Also, instead of saying the animals died, he said the animals that had perished. So the use of the words remains and also perished make the sentence less unpleasant. Euphemism is actually very commonly used in our everyday life. For example, very often we say passed away instead of died. We also say low-income families instead of poor families. You can also say a pre-owned phone rather than saying a second-hand phone. If we're talking about some social groups, nowadays we no longer use the terms like the handicapped or the retarded because these terms may seem a bit insulting and also negative. Instead, we can say the physically disabled or the mentally challenged to refer to these two different social groups who are the needy in the society. The next rhetorical device is hyperbole, which means exaggeration. They are actually the same. Let's take a look at these examples. Plastic products take forever to break down. Actually, we all know plastic products do not really take forever to break down. It actually takes like very long time. The writer is saying however, just to exaggerate, to emphasize how long it takes for plastic products to break down. The next rhetorical device is what we call parenthesis. The word itself may be difficult, but then it just refers to a word, phrase, or statement that we add after a particular noun to give extra information or additional examples. For example here, everyday electronic products containing harmful substances, lithium, cadmium, mercury, etc. are discarded. So here, between these two dashes, this is what we call parentheses. We are just giving examples of harmful substances. So very often when parentheses is used, you will see dashes or brackets or even like commas. If you remember the relative clauses that you learned last year or in Form 3, actually it is very similar to non-defining relative clauses. That is the one we use with commas because they served the same purpose of giving extra information. The next rhetorical device is rhetorical questions, and I guess you are very familiar with them. It is just a question that has an obvious answer, or the writer or the speaker is going to give an answer to. So you can look at this example first. Who would gaze at this photo of a skeletal polar bear scavenging for food? The writer or the speaker is not really interested in knowing who would gaze at this photo, and instead, he or she is trying to say everyone would be saddened when he or she looks at this photo. Similarly, for the next example, Who is to blame for the mass coral bleaching? Bleaching means the coral reefs are turning white. We all are. Here, the writer answered this question himself or herself simply to draw our attention to his or her opinion that everyone is responsible for coral bleaching. The last rhetorical device we're going to learn today is very simple. It's just repetition. So the same word, phrase, or clause is being repeated a few times to create a more memorable effects on the readers or the audience. For example, here, now it's the time. Act now. The time is now. So the word now is repeated 3 times to emphasize the urgency of the need for action here. So let's start with our first activity. We're going to read an article about the waste problem in Hong Kong. So as you read, can you try to identify the rhetorical devices used in the underlined parts? So I'll give you about 30 seconds to read. Okay, so for A, mountains of food waste and also a sea of unwanted rubbish. So obviously the answer would be hyperbole. The writer is trying to exaggerate the amount of waste. As for B, where is this garbage graveyard? In a backwater. So the writer is giving us the answer to a question he or she asked. So this is a rhetorical question. So let's move on. So please read paragraph 2 and 3. And again, I'll give you 1 minute. So for C, 1,000,000 times. So the writer is exaggerating the number, and this is hyperbole. For D, a problem that has been building up. We are saying this is parenthesis, trying to add extra information, figuratively, literally. So in terms of like figuratively, the problem has been building up. We are trying to say the problem is getting more and more serious. Whereas like literally, the problem is like the waste has been building up. For E, what is stopping the government? Cold, hard cash. So this is rhetorical questions. For paragraph 4 and 5, again, I'll give you 1 minute. So can you please try to read them and answer F to I. Okay, so for F, food waste from the city's low-end mass market food outlets. So low-end here is like it's like cheap. Mass market food outlet is more like food courts to me. So we are talking about food courts selling really cheap food. So we but then the writer does not use the word like cheap. So this is euphemism. The writer is trying to use better words to replace some words that may be a little bit negative. For G, you can see the two dashes here and also a relative clause. So this is more likely to be parenthesis, adding extra additional information. Similarly, for H, such as incinerators and biofuel generators, we are giving more examples of the options for waste management. So this is also parenthesis. As for I, plastic bags, plastic wrapping, and plastic labels. Obviously, this is repetition. Let's move on to the last paragraph then. This is a rather short one, so I'll just give you 20 seconds. Okay, so no plans, no solutions, and no ideas. Obviously, this is repetition.